But why would a victim report an offence if the first person they meet is a police officer who accuses of making it up, or a doctor who's sceptical of the story, or a legal system who wants to put her through the grinder? Why would you? So you don't. Are we any different? Probably not.
Can you give us a sense of what it's like arriving in Gaza or in the West Bank and you're being asked to set up a program to deal with victims of sexual violence? What's the first step?
Understanding what's been done before you, what worked, what didn't work and why. There's no point in repeating previous mistakes. And secondly, the richest source of information will be local people. You know, what do you think needs to happen? How might it happen? And I must admit the women's groups in the West Bank are extraordinarily resourceful, interested, enthusiastic, acknowledging what they haven't got and acknowledging where they'd like to go. That partnership proved invaluable. I'll give you an example. In Jordan, there is a sexual assault service in Amman, the capital there, and I went to visit it. Now, the big problem in changing attitudes to women in some of these very patriarchal societies, I take the view it's got to come internally. People can come from outside and say, well, try this or try that. But the process has to be driven by the people themselves. Now, there was a wonderful opportunity because the Queen of Jordan visited this centre. Someone put some feelers out and she was interested, and a very articulate, intelligent woman, and she came on and said, this is a really important project. And to her enormous credit, she took the service under her wing and provided support of various kinds, but particularly public support. Here was the Queen advocating for the rights of women, for the rights of victims, for the rights of disenfranchised people. What it did to the movement in that country was significant, but what it did to the staff of the facility was wonderful. Suddenly they felt that they were front and centre and that they were doing important work, and it got a momentum of its own. Very good people wanted to come and work there. Good people stayed. Now, we haven't achieved that successfully elsewhere, but it's slowly happening, particularly legal advocates, a number of the social support services. Always a big hurdle is the police because they are fairly locked into a way of thinking, and this is the way things get done. But for all of them, providing sort of open workshops and talking about what is it that's missing and how can we get there. You've all got daughters, you've got wives, you've got female friends. How do you see them going down a pathway that's littered with these terrible personal beliefs or obstacles, and how can we get round them? The biggest hurdle for me was understanding cultural differences. So, for instance, one of the issues was the personal safety of people who reported they'd been sexually assaulted. This was a real issue.
And this is in Jordan, or this is in the West Bank?
In the West Bank. I suspect it's not dissimilar in a number of countries. I mean, even here we've had situations of retribution on people who report crimes to police. But there it was different. And the process there was if a woman reported, there was a high risk to her personal safety. And many of these women, after the report was made, were immediately placed into shelters. And for some of them, they spent the rest of their life there. Completely marginalised from their own community, family and others. But the feeling was that they were at very high risk of damage. So those intricate arms of a functioning legal system needs to acknowledge and accept and address that as well, because on one hand, you may well be preserving her life, but on the other hand, she's being penalised for reporting. And there's a very uneasy balance to try and achieve there.
So at the moment in the West Bank, What do the services look like for women?
Look, there is a long way to go. But I'd have to say that listening to stories of what things might have been like a decade ago or a generation ago, I think public awareness has improved dramatically. I've recently been doing a bit of work in the Ukraine, and the level of sophistication is quite different. But the most crucial issue in that country, in the West Bank, and in a number of other countries I've worked in, relates to men's attitudes towards women. It's crucial. Now, forget all the forensics. It's all about how men perceive women, how men treat women, and progressing that does require local knowledge and addressing. You can sit there and observe it, but why would a victim report an offence if the first person they meet is a police officer who accuses of making it up, or a doctor who's sceptical of the story, or a legal system who wants to put her through the grinder? Why would you? So you don't. Are we any different? Probably not.
So when you arrive somewhere like Gaza or West Bank, and the infrastructure is fragmented, the services are barely functioning, how do you even begin to provide sexual assault care? What's the first step?
For me, and this might be a simplistic way, it's about addressing the health and welfare issues first, because if these cases go nowhere through the legal system, if you can go to bed at night and think, well, look, I think I made a contribution, or the system made a contribution to her health and welfare, there's a very small step forward. If we can get more people being prepared to come forward and report it, they get an early intervention rather than no intervention at all. And if their health and safety is guaranteed or addressed, at least the system's made small steps. So getting a change of thinking around police, around lawyers, around doctors, around the community, that sexual violence is an extraordinarily destructive form of behaviour. It can happen to anyone, and there are no excuses for it. And a mark of a society is that it protects and acknowledges the more vulnerable members of its community. People sign up to that sort of process. But I'm not saying it's always successful. It's always going to be very small steps. And ultimately the drivers have to be locals.